are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. By sharing our collective expertise, we will show you how to harness, control, and use your own skill set to achieve ultimate success and live the life you want. And now, please welcome your host.
This is The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest, personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
Good to have you on the show. This is Omobola Stephen, your host on The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. Now, The Backstory is with Omobola Stephen, focus on government and politics. We like to shine more light on what has not worked and what will make it work with disruptive mindship conversations from experts and professionals from across the globe. On today's show, I have Jared Karol, who is the head of product experience at Translator Incorporated. Now, for more than 20 years, he has been in social justice spaces as a teacher, DI consultant, writer, public speaker, and facilitator, specializing in guiding white people to confront racism and be unapologetic antiracist. Jared has extensive experience in Fortune 500 companies, facilitating difficult conversations and coaching executives to be impactful storytellers. Now, his first book, The White Guy Confronting Racism, An Invitation to Reflect and Act, was released in November 2021. An avid reader, accomplished musician, and active meditator. He lives with his partner and teenage twins in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, I like to call him the White Guy Confronting Racism. Welcome to me, Jared.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, a great introduction. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me on The Backstory with Omobola Stephen, Jared. Now, I'm looking forward to a really worthwhile conversation with you on the show today. Jared, what does it mean for a white guy to show up in unapologetic support of Black people and their lived experience? Is that something that we need to know?
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, it's a great way to dive right into this topic. What it means for me and what I try and help others, white folks, whether it's one-on-one conversations or in my writing or when I facilitate workshops, is how do we show up where we understand that our norm, right? Like my norm as a white man and all the privileges that I have, all the things I don't have to think about, from police, brutality to not getting a promotion to being, all these things. How do we navigate the world with that awareness so that when I interact with other people, whether they're my colleagues, my neighbors, people at the, in the community, that I understand that everyone's coming from a different perspective. And I might not know the specifics of that, but I need to be aware and ready to hear someone else's story that very likely is going to be way different than mine. So we're really kind of about this kind of emotional intelligence and this humility, this racial and cultural humility that even though I'm part of the dominant, at least in America, right, part of the dominant culture, the dominant race, doesn't mean I'm better. Doesn't mean I'm superior. Doesn't mean that my norm is the norm. So I think it's really an ethos, kind of a mindset that I'm trying to help people kind of take up.
Right. Now, it is interesting to know that you came to find purpose in confronting racism. Purpose in this context, right? What do you mean?
So here's the thing. It's about, when we bring, so I actually am a certified purpose coach, which, it's kind of another topic, but really it gets around like intrinsic motivation. So what are we motivated by individually, collectively, right? And so for me, and I, you'll hear me talk about like, for me, I base a lot of this in my personal story because I use my story, not because it's, the story, but because I want to model what I'd like to see other people doing around really making this work personal. Because I think a lot of people, to get back to your question, like around purpose, they don't especially white folks, don't see the purpose. Why should I care about racism? It doesn't affect me. And I'm saying, actually, it does. It affects all of us, right? The politics of it, the relationships of it, the injustice of it affects all of us. So for me, I help people like, what is your personal backstory, your motive, what could be or should be your motivation for caring about this? And, for some people, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got some stuff. And then, they can start to do the work. And other people, it's like, I don't know. I've never thought of it. Right. So there are different, people are at different levels. And, I think mistakenly, if we look at the history of racism, especially in the United States, there is this misunderstanding that it's all because of hatred, right? That, oh, well, white people are mean to Black people. And so if they weren't mean, then everything would be okay. It's like, no, it's policies, it's politics, it's laws, it's norms, it's all these things. And so trying to help people understand like the purpose, individually and societally, is to create communities where everyone has equal access and equitable access to opportunities and to autonomy and agency to be all that they can be.
You're right. Now, you mentioned hate in your discussion. Now, talking about that, I want us to explore a bit on how racist and conspiracy theory led to the deadly massacre in Buffalo. I know that you have an idea on that. Now, we know that the 18-year-old gunman was fueled by white supremacy when he started to shoot in a predominantly Black neighborhood. Now, what can be done to this hate?
Yeah, so, obviously it's a very chilling and unfortunate incident. And there's so many angles to look at this. One thing, as you brought up, right, it was very clear. It was very overt, right? He published this, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, right? This manifesto. He made it very clear his views. He wasn't shy about it. He felt emboldened to say and then go do these things without any kind of, he wasn't shy about it. And so I think what that represents is, yes, there are people clearly who take things to the extreme and commit these types of acts. There are, the Proud Boys, there are the Oath Keepers, there are, all kinds of individuals and groups who unabashedly promote this type of behavior. We're talking about replacement theory and just the straightforward, Black people are not as capable, not as intelligent as white people, right? So it's very blatant. And here's, I think, what's really important for us to understand is that while that extreme view is the most, easy to identify, there's so much in just the way we think, the way our, if you watch, which I don't, but if you watch Fox News and you see someone like Tucker Carlson, who has a huge audience. I don't even know what the numbers are, but millions of people, right? He's basically saying the same things. Now, he's not advocating directly for violence and murder, because he can't do that on his cable news show, but he's basically saying the same thing. Donald Trump is basically saying the same thing. Other people in government and other positions of influence are basically saying the same thing. Now, there's dog whistle, there's euphemism, there's all kinds of ways that they get around, not getting in trouble for it and being able to deny it or, kind of dismiss it, but it's the same thing. And so I think the work for people who care about other people, who care about humanity, who care about justice and equity, need to understand this isn't just about hatred. This isn't just about the blatant acts like we saw in Buffalo. This isn't about just Nazis and the KKK. It is about those things, and it's also about so much more.
That's right, absolutely. Interestingly, I want us to talk about the great replacement theory, right? My audience would like to know, what is it all about? And do you think think that this will be appealing, right, in some predominantly white neighborhoods?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on replacement theory, but from what I understand, it's this, and it has many different manifestations, right, and implications. But basically, it's this idea that you know, and again, in the West, in the United States and Europe, and I'm sure other parts of the world, this idea that white people, so, you know, again, I'm putting air quotes here, you know, so-called white people, and there's a whole history of, you know, how white people became, you know, came to be white people, right? Which, if we have time, we can talk about that a little bit. But, you know, white people, we've been so used to being in charge, to being dominant, to being in power, in politics, in government, in business, in, you know, media, in music, right? Like all these things, we've been so used to being in charge, and we still are, by the way, right? And as more, you know, as demographics shift, as mindsets shift, as politics shift, and more people who are not white, you know, Black folks, Asian folks, other, you know, BIPOC, people of color, and other, you know, if we want to talk about, you know, the trans community or the LGBT community, right? As more and more people get more visibility, more power, more influence, it's this idea that, oh my gosh, if those people get power, we are going to lose power, and that's not okay. So we have to fight this. So it's this zero-sum game, right? It's like there's a pie, and there are only so many pieces of pie. And if, you know, I'm used to having, you know, 7/10 of the pie, and now if I only get to have 5/10, wait, that's a problem, because next it's going to be I only have 3/10, and then it's going to be 1/10, which we know is absurd, and that's not the way it works. But that's this idea. So rather than going, hey, it's a both and, it becomes this either or. So we have to stand up for ourselves, you know, and it's this. And so that's where you see, whether it's blatant, like in Buffalo, right? This like having defend the white race, or you see it in more subtle ways in legal, you know, legislation, in politics, in policy, in corporations, around making sure that, you know, Black people and other folks of color don't get too much power, too much influence, because then we're going to lose ours.
Right. Now, you keep emphasizing power, you keep emphasizing influence. Now, do you think the white folks, especially the senior leaders who has a lot of power, influence and visibility, and leverage the power of their personal story, and now to create and sustain more anti-racist organizations and communities, just like what you're doing?
Yeah. So there's some, and here's what's hard for you. So if you think of like anti-racist kind of, I don't know, awareness as like a continuum, right? So you have people like, you know, like the Buffalo massacre clearly is not anti-racist, right? So you have that camp. And then you have, on like the far other side, you have people who are just like, you know, I call them, you know, social justice warriors, who they're in the bomb throwing stage of their revolution, right? They're all about rhetoric and you know, just right. And then you have, you know, this whole continuum of where people are. So I found that most white leaders in you know, who I work with directly or who I see just kind of, you know, in organizations, are pretty in the middle. And there's some who would lean like, yeah, I don't really believe in this stuff. So maybe they're not openly antagonistic, but they're also not, they might say a few things just to kind of, you know, cover their asses, right? They might say some things, but they're really kind of just, they're not really saying much. They're not leveraging their power. But who I really like to work with are the people who are, they have a conscience, and they say, hey, I know I'm the CEO, or I'm, you know, whatever my role is, I know I have a responsibility. I don't know a lot, but I want to do the right thing. And so I'm working with them to leverage their personal story, because what happens is, if I'm, you know, let's just take a prototype, like I'm a 55-year-old white man and I'm the CEO of a big company, right? And so I get up and I have all these opportunities in media and, you know, communications, and I say things like, you know, what happened in Buffalo was wrong, and, you know, we condemn violence. It's like, okay, that was okay, right? but it becomes performative. So how do we know if like, okay, so great, you made a statement, but what are you doing personally? What are you demanding and expecting from your company, from your industry, from your clients, from your partners, from your employees, right? All these things. And so what I'm trying to get people to understand is there has to be some vulnerability, right? Here's why I personally, CEO of big company, care about this. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm trying to communicate to the people who, report to me, right? And getting that vulnerability, because the biggest hurdle for white people is to be seen, to be vulnerable and be seen as like actually caring about other people, actually caring about the humanity of Black people, right? So it comes down to this humanity piece. Yes, it has political and policy and legal implications, but it comes down to humanity. So if I've got this big platform and I say, hey, here's my story of racism or anti-racism. Here's what I'm doing to change, to evolve, and here's what I'm doing about it. Here's what I want us to do about it. Then it's like, whoa, okay. Wow, I actually got a little teary there listening to you say that, right? And so that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. And it takes some time. Some people are like, okay, I can do that. And other people are resisting it. So it's a challenge, but that's why, I keep doing the work.
Right. Thank you so much, Jared Karol, for your insight. Now, we need more equitable and just organizations. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what role does emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence, what role does it play in developing leaders to be impactful champions now for more equitable and just organizations?
Yeah, great question. So, emotional intelligence is a big bucket, right? And there are people like Brene Brown and other people who really make a career out of kind of studying, emotional intelligence and emotions and relationships. So that's not what I do, but I am influenced and inspired by those types of work. So I see a couple key so as a white person, and keep on the topic of, white leaders, as a white leader, senior leader with lots of power, influence, visibility, how aware am I of how other people are perceiving me, right? Because I think a lot of people don't get that part. They don't have this understanding of how other people are seeing. So there's that part. There's the curiosity part. And the curiosity part is, oh, wow, like, I wasn't familiar with that, of that topic, but tell me more. I really want to learn more. So there's the curiosity part. Then there's the empathy part and the compassion part. And I think empathy is often, misunderstood as quote unquote walking in someone else's shoes. And it's easy to dismiss because, like, well, I don't know what it's like to be, a Black woman. So how can I empathize with you? But what I try and emphasize is, hey, I do know what it's like to be, not included in something that's important to me. I do know what it's like to feel alienated, to feel isolated, right? So really tapping into the emotions of what we all as humans experience. And so that's what I try and make the shift. And there's an important part to this, which we haven't talked about, but this bias towards action bias. So you might have heard of the phrase action bias, where senior leaders, they're busy, they've got a lot going on, they have other responsibilities, right? They want to just be told like what to do. Tell me what to do and I'll go do it. Well, it's like, it doesn't really work that way. Right? Because then you do something and you think you've done it, and then you go, okay, I've done it. And then you go back to status quo. So I'm really trying to get people to, embody how to be rather than a list of things to do. And that's, important and challenging work and sometimes difficult work.
Right. I can only wish you best of luck in that project, Jared.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much once again, Jared Karol. Do you have any parting words you'd like to share with my audience?
What I'd like, and I know your audience and your program is focused on government and politics and policy, and that's so important, and that's how things change, right? When we change laws, when we change policies that are more inclusive, more just, more equitable. And I want us to remember that we have to start with humanity. We have to start with humans when we're thinking of what laws we want to make, how we want to pass legislation. We have to think about, how is this going to be better for humans, and how are the laws that we make going to help humans, individuals, groups have more agency, have more autonomy, have more equity, have more power, influence, justice, etc. Because I think sometimes we focus on the politics of it, and like the humanity is almost like an afterthought. So I'm saying focus on the humanity, and then the policies and the politics that we enact will be better. So that's my parting thought.
Thank you for the parting shot. Right. Any social media handles in your?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on.
I know you do have one.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can just find me at Jared Karol on LinkedIn, JaredKarol. That's really the only social media I do. I kind of try and stay off Twitter and Facebook and other things. And then, yeah, you can just go to whiteguyconfrontingracism.com, and that's where the book is, and you can order it there, and it's available internationally too. So yeah, anyone can get it, and then anyone can enjoy it and hopefully learn from it.
Yeah, we do. It's a pleasure having Jared Karol on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, right? Like, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can mail me at omobolasteven.outlook.com. I'll be looking forward to your mail. It's really been a worthwhile time having Jared on the show today. Let's do this some other time. Till I come your way, I need it to be.